All right, a couple of weeks ago, the win totals for a lot of the college football teams for the 2024 season got released on a lot of the gambling sites, the Vegas odds, that kind of thing. We're going to look at the SEC today. If you guys like this video, I'll do the same thing for the other conferences too. So let me know down below if you want to see a video like this involving the other conferences. So the win totals, if you don't know, it's a gambling number. Okay, it's not necessarily a prediction. Now, predictions have a lot to do with it, but anyway, it's a gambling number. So they Vegas or DraftKings or whoever it is, whatever sports book, will put a number out for a team. So we'll take Georgia for example. In fact, if I scroll down, I think Georgia's the first one on the list. So you'll see Georgia 10.5. So this is a betting number. So what that means is you either bet over that number or under that number. And these are regular season wins. So we're talking about the 12-game regular season schedule, right? So in this case, if you think Georgia's going to win over 10.5 games, you would bet the over on this number, 10.5, which means, of course, Georgia has to go 11-1 or 12-0 for you to win your bet on over 10.5. If you think they're going to win less than 10.5 games, which of course will be 10-2, 9-3, 8-4, 7-5, so forth, so on, you would bet under the number of 10.5. So I'm going to go through the list of SEC teams here. We'll briefly look at each team's schedule too, just so you have an idea, because it's not as easy as just going, well, I think Georgia's good. They can probably win 10 or 11 games. You got to know who they're playing. Who do they play? When do they play them? Do they play them on the road or do they play them at home? Is it a neutral site game? Is there stretches of time during the season where maybe they have back-to-back road games, which can cause teams to trip up? Things like that. So you have to kind of understand the schedule before you try to determine, do you think a team's going to win more or less than this projected number? So if you got Georgia at 10.5, if we go over and take a look at Georgia's schedule, let's close that. They open up with Clemson. That's a neutral site game. Georgia's right now is about a 13-point favorite in that game, so they're expected to win it. Tennessee Tech, it should be a relatively easy win. On the road at Kentucky, first SEC game of the year. Brand new quarterback for Kentucky with actually Brock Vandagriff, who transferred from Georgia. Georgia has had Kentucky's number lately. I think Georgia has only lost to them, I think, like once in the last 20 years, something like that. And it was way back in, like 09 maybe, 2010, somewhere around there. Anyway, Georgia will be a significant favorite in that one. And they get a bye week, and they go on the road at Bama. Now, the line for that game's out already, too, and Georgia's about a 3-point favorite. But that's a toss-up game. Georgia could easily lose that game on the road at Bama, right? Come back home, they play Auburn, another team that's sort of trying to pull themselves up. Another team that Georgia has dominated over the last 20 or 25 years. I think Georgia is something like 17-3 against Auburn in the last 20 games, and they play every single year. And it's a home game for Georgia. Mississippi State, again, a team with a new coaching staff, sort of permanent rebuild mode. Georgia will be a huge favorite there. And then you got on the road at Texas. Probably the most difficult game on Georgia's schedule. Texas is ranked in the top 5 of every single preseason poll and ranking you look at. They're ranked number 1 in some, number 2 in some, number 3 in some. They're very, very highly ranked. They return their coaching staff. They return Quinn Ewers. They got to replace some wide receivers and some defensive line talent, notably. But they're going to be loaded again. That's a difficult game. Georgia's a very small favorite right now on the road at Texas in the futures market. They didn't have a bye week. Now, you get 2 bye weeks, of course, this year. We've been over that before. And then they have the annual rivalry game with Florida. Florida's down bad. Georgia will be a big favorite in that one. On the road at Ole Miss, probably Georgia's second or third most difficult game. What's going to catch up with Georgia this year, I think, is the fact that their 3 toughest games are all on the road. You got at Bama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. I'd be shocked if Georgia's able to win all 3 of those. And then Tennessee at home. Georgia will be a significant favorite there. UMass and Georgia Tech. So really, when to go back to this number here, Georgia at 10.5. If you're going to bet the over, that means you think Georgia's only going to lose 1 or 0 games, okay? Could Georgia beat Bama at Bama? Yes. Could they beat Texas at Texas? Yes. Could they beat Ole Miss at Ole Miss? Yes. Are they likely to win all 3 of those games? No, I don't think so. It would be very, very unlikely, in my opinion, for Georgia to sweep those 3 road games, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss. So let's assume they lose 1 of those. All right, that puts Georgia at potentially 11-1. They then have to run the remainder of their schedule for this 10.5 to go over. I think this is probably the right number for Georgia betting-wise. I think they're going to get a lot of action on the under for people who think they'll probably go 10-2, maybe even 9-3. And I think they're going to get a lot of action on the over, who think Georgia can win 2 out of those 3 tough road games and then run the remainder of their schedule. They've gone undefeated each of the last 2 regular seasons. I don't think that will be the case this year. I don't know that I would bet this number here because I'm not. Yeah, I really don't know what. I don't think Georgia's going 12-0. I think they could go 11-1. I think they could go 10-2. I think this is probably the right number for Georgia, 10.5. What do you think? Let me know down below. Moving on, Texas also at 10.5. Now this one I would take the under on. We're going to look at their schedule. In fact, we'll pull it up now. If we look at Texas' schedule, I'd probably take the under here. Moving to the SEC is going to be, I think, a little bit of a sort of catching up period for Texas. Not that Texas can't compete with any of the teams in the SEC. They obviously can. They could beat a Georgia, a Bama, an LSU, a Tennessee, or whatever on down the list that you want to name, Oklahoma, whoever it is. Can they beat them all in their first year in the SEC? Probably not. I think Texas probably drops a couple of games. So then you start looking at, okay, which 2 games could they potentially drop if you want to bet the under on Texas, which, again, the number is at 10.5. Well, they got a really difficult non-con game on the road at Michigan. Now, Michigan lost their head coach, a lot of their coaching staff. They lost a lot of talent on that team, but they get a lot of talent back, too, and they've recruited really, really well. Top 5, top 10 almost every single year under Harbaugh. So they have a lot of talent, and Texas has to play them there. That's a tough game. I would probably lean Texas in that game, but it's definitely a game you have to at least consider the possibility that Texas could lose. UTSA, Colorado State, they'll win both of those games surrounding the Michigan game, and the Louisiana Monroe game should be a win as well. Then they get into their conference schedule. They start out at home with Mississippi State, a probable win for Texas. They'll be a significant favorite. Then a bye week, and then the rivalry game with Oklahoma. Now, do I think Texas is better than Oklahoma? Yeah. Do I think Texas was better than Oklahoma last year? Yeah. And Oklahoma beat them. We know how these rivalry games go. I think you have to at least consider this one of the possible losses for Texas. Again, this isn't a prediction video. I'm not saying they will lose. I'll do my predictions later in the year. But they could lose. The possibility exists they could lose to Michigan. The possibility exists they could lose to Oklahoma. If they lose both of those games, the under has already hit, and we're not even halfway through the season. Then they play Georgia. They obviously could lose that game. Again, not saying they will, but that's a game on Texas' schedule where they could possibly lose. Then they go on the road to take on Vanderbilt. That's a win. A bye week before they host Florida. I think that's a win. On the road at Arkansas. Losing KJ Jefferson hurts them. We'll see what Arkansas looks like this year. It feels like this is a winner-go-home season for Sam Pittman here. Texas will be a significant favorite. This is an old Southwest Conference rivalry game, a throwback game here. We'll see. Kentucky, I would lean Texas in this game right now. It's at home. We'll see how improved, if at all, Kentucky is this season with a new offensive coordinator and Brock Vandagriff at quarterback, but Texas should win that one at home. On the road at Texas A&M is going to be one of the biggest games this year in all of college football, just because it's probably the biggest rivalry in college football that we haven't seen in 20 years, right? This used to be a huge game every single year. Texas is better than Texas A&M. They're replacing their coaching staff. They lost some pieces to the portal. I'm not expecting a ton from Texas A&M this year, but it is there, and it's going to be an emotional game. I would put this in the category of at least possible for Texas to lose this game. So to me, when I look at the schedule, there are 4 or 5 games here that Texas could possibly lose. Do I think they'll lose 4 or 5? No. Do I think they'll lose 2 or more? Probably. And so I would take the under on Texas at 10.5. Let's move on to the next team on the list here. They've got Alabama at 9.5. Going to have to take a look at the schedule here. My instinct is to take out under the 9.5. It feels like an 8-4 or a 9-3 type of deal, sort of resetting there with a new coaching staff and losing arguably the best coach in the history of college football, Nick Saban. But let's take a look at the schedule and see what it looks like. We'll have to find Alabama on here. Let's see. Where's Bama? That's Texas A&M. Do they play Bama? Okay, Auburn. We'll click Auburn, and that'll take us to Bama. There we go. Now we can pull up the Bama schedule. Sorry for that. I'm very prepared, and I know what I'm doing. They start out with Western Kentucky. That's an easy win. South Florida. Despite what happened last year, that should be an easy win for Alabama. Then things get a little bit tougher on the road at Wisconsin. Now, year 2 for Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. I do expect some improvement out of Wisconsin under Luke Fickell in year 2 there. I don't know if it's enough improvement to beat an Alabama team. Whatever you think about Kalen DeBoer, whatever you think about what Alabama lost in the transfer portal, and they lost some significant talent, they still hold a fairly large talent advantage over 99% of the teams that they're going to play this year, including Wisconsin. So other than the fact that this is a road game in an unfamiliar environment, for Bama on the road at Wisconsin, Camp Randall, the whole jump around thing, it'll be a wild scene. It's hard for me to imagine right now Bama losing that game. I guess you would put it in the category of it's possible, but I would be surprised, honestly, if Bama lost that game. Then they get a bye week, then they host Georgia. That's obviously a game they could possibly lose. They're an underdog right now in that game by about 4 points, depending on where you look. On the road at Vandy should be an easy win. South Carolina, again, a team that appears to be going nowhere quick, fast, and in a hurry. In Bama, most likely a Bama win there. On the road at Tennessee, I think this is one of those ones you have to say it's possible, right? I mean, the last time Bama played at Tennessee, they had Bryce Young and a bunch of NFL wide receivers, and they lost. Now, their defense let them down. They gave up 50-something points in that game, and Tennessee had the best season they've had in 25 years. But they got to play them there. It can be a tough place to play. This will be Kalen DeBoer's first sort of foray into real SEC road environments, right? The game at Wisconsin will be crazy, but it's not an SEC game. At Vandy, I mean, forget it. It's a high school team and a high school field. South Carolina, they get it home. This game at Tennessee will be sort of a christening for Kalen DeBoer into SEC road environments. You at least have to consider the possibility Bama could lose that game. So Georgia, Tennessee, possible losses. Home against Missouri. I think this is an important game for both teams. You start to look towards the 12-team playoff and how that's going to pan out in November when they get ready to decide on those final 12 teams. How many SEC teams are going to get in? What's the magic number? Will 2 losses get you in? Will 3 losses get you in? There's going to be a cutoff point somewhere, and teams like Alabama and Missouri, I think, and several other teams in the SEC, are going to be those teams at the end of the year that are hovering around the 2-3 loss mark, and you're going to hear the arguments, who should get in? Should it be this team? Should it be that team? Well, the winner of this game between Missouri and Alabama clearly has a leg up at the end of the year in terms of who might make it into a 12-team playoff. It's a huge game. Advantage for Bama to have it in Alabama, though, at home game for them. On the road at LSU, a possibility that they lose. Now, LSU had a terrible defense last year, and all they really had was Jaden Daniels, and they lost him now to the NFL. LSU's defense is going to have to take a huge step forward if they want to come anywhere close to being able to compete with the upper echelon of the SEC, including Alabama. But it is a road game at LSU. Will probably be a night game, crazy environment. It's at least possible Bama could drop that game. Come back home to play Mercer. That'll be an easy win. On the road at Oklahoma, I expect Bama to win that game. I think they'll be a favorite. I think Oklahoma's got a little bit of a ways to go as far as lines of scrimmage. I'm not sold on Jackson Arnold. We'll see how he progresses over the course of the year. He'll be a first-year starter there. And Brent Venables has got to prove something defensively. Oklahoma has not gotten any better defensively, really, since Lincoln Riley left. They do have to play them there, though. We'll see. And then back home against Auburn. And I'm done. Look, I'm done trying to predict that game. I'm done trying to, it seems like it just doesn't matter how good one of those teams are. The other one always plays it close. But, it's a home game for Bama. I would assume they're going to win that game. So, again, back to the win total for Bama. The projected win total, 9.5. Do you bet over that? Do you bet under that? I think that's probably the right number. This and Georgia, I think, are hard to bet. Georgia at 10.5, I think, is the right number. Could go 11-1, could go 10-2. Bama at 9.5, I think, is also the right number. Could go 9-3, could go 10-2. My sort of lean right now is to take the under. Maybe a 9-3 type season for Bama, but they clearly could go 10-2, 11-1, whatever the case there. Continuing on, we've got LSU at 9.5. I think this is too high. We're going to look at their schedule here, but I think 9.5 wins is too much for LSU. I don't know that their defense can improve enough in 1 year to make up for losing Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels was a one-man wrecking crew last year. Without Jaden Daniels, LSU's a 4-win team last year. Now, I know they've got Nussmeier coming in, and he's got some experience, but he's not Jaden Daniels. He might be a little bit better thrower of the football than Jaden Daniels, and that's debatable. But he doesn't give you near the athleticism, the running around ability, the sort of game-changing, playmaking ability that Jaden Daniels gave LSU last year. And again, I don't trust Brian Kelly to get that defense where it needs to be in just one season after how bad I saw it be last year. But let's take a look at the schedule. Again, they've got LSU at 9.5 wins. All right, they start off with Southern Cal. Boy, I would have loved to have seen this game last year. You talk about a track meet, 2 teams with NFL quarterbacks and no defenses at all anywhere to be found if we would have saw this game last year. I don't know what's going to happen in this game here. Both teams have terrible defenses coming back from a year ago. Both teams are replacing elite, high-level, first-round talent NFL quarterbacks. Which quarterback plays better out of the gate? Nussmeier's a little bit more experienced. It's a neutral site game in Nevada, so no real home field advantage there. Nevada's closer to California than it is LSU, but you're still talking about significant travel for both fan bases there. I'm leaning LSU in this one. I just feel like they have a little bit of an overall talent edge over Southern Cal. Two very experienced coaches here with Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly. This is an interesting game here to kick things off Sunday, September 1st in week 1. I think you at least have to consider the possibility, though, that LSU could lose that game, even if you feel like they might win it. Nichols should be a win on the road at South Carolina. I think this is a game LSU's got to win, and I think they can win it. They're a better team than South Carolina, but that can be a tricky place to play, especially when you're not used to playing there, and LSU is not. Even though both teams are in the SEC, they've been in different divisions forever. Now, there are no divisions in the SEC anymore, but the point is this isn't a place, South Carolina, Williams-Brice Stadium, where LSU is used to playing every other year. They play there about every 8 or 9 years. It could be a tricky situation here for LSU, but they'll be a favorite in that game and will most likely win it. UCLA for another non-conference game. Chip Kelly gone in the middle of January, kind of put UCLA in a tough spot. They lost that quarterback, Dante Moore, who they thought was the future there. A good running team last year and actually played decent defense as well, but they just lost so much coaching staff-wise and player-wise. LSU should win that game. South Alabama should be another win for LSU. So that gets us up to the bye week. So there's, LSU could definitely drop a game here in these first 5 games. Southern Cal, South Carolina, UCLA. They'll probably be favored in all 3 of those, but I don't think anybody would be surprised if they lost one of them. So let's sort of assume one loss there. You come out of your bye week, they host Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a better team than LSU. There hasn't been very many years throughout history where you can say that. You could say that right now. Ole Miss is going to have a better team than LSU in 2024. That doesn't guarantee a win. We see better teams lose all the time. But it is a home game for LSU. That's a huge advantage. Ole Miss is used to playing there, though. Play there every other year. If LSU's defense isn't any better than what we saw last year, Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin and company will run up and down the field on them, and this will turn into not a very close game. I think you have to consider this a possibility of an LSU loss. On the road at Arkansas, a game LSU can win, a game they could lose, though. If Arkansas is a little bit better than I think they will be, they could give them a game. It's on the road at Arkansas at Texas A&M. Again, brand new coach there, lost some talent to the portal, but it's a possibility. I think LSU could lose that one. Bye week, then you play Alabama. Again, definitely a possibility you could lose. At Florida, LSU has owned Florida. They play every single year. They're the cross-division rivals, or have been cross-division rivals for years in the SEC, and LSU has dominated this series. Other than the game being at Florida, I don't see an advantage for Florida here. LSU should win that one. Vandy should be a relatively easy win. And then Oklahoma. Again, how much better are they going to be defensively? How far along is Jackson Arnold at this point in the season, last game of the regular season, right? LSU could potentially lose that game. So to go back to the over-under at 9.5, in order to bet the over here, you got to think LSU's going 10-2 or better. I don't see that. There's too many potential landmines here. Southern Cal, UCLA, Bama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. I don't see them getting to 10-2. Now I see them getting to 9-3. And who knows, that may be good enough for a playoff spot, depending on how everything else works out or shakes out in and around college football. And maybe they pick up a couple of big wins along the way. But I can't take the over on 9.5 for LSU. I have to take the under there. Missouri at 9.5. Now, they have one of the more workable schedules within the SEC. Let's take a look at it now. Where's Missouri? Right here. Here's Missouri. Missouri, best year in a long time last year, finished in the top 10, beat Ohio State in a New Year's Six game. They lose some pieces. They get some pieces back. They even lost some key pieces of the coaching staff as well. But head coach Eli Drinkwitz is there, and they're poised to have another good year. I haven't seen Missouri people this excited in a long time. They think they're in for another top 10 season and a potential trip to the playoffs. They host Murray State and Buffalo to kick the season off. 2 easy wins there. And then Boston College, which is a Power 5 program, so a Power 5 non-con here, but again, a game Missouri should win relatively easily. And then they get into the conference schedule with Vanderbilt. So you look at these first 4 games here, Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and Vandy, very likely Missouri's going to be 4-0 heading into their first bye week. Then things get a little bit more difficult on the road at Texas A&M. That's a possible loss for Missouri. I think Missouri's better than Texas A&M. They've got more consistency within the coaching staff with Eli Drinkwitz returning, and they've proven that they are a better team than Texas A&M over the last couple of years. But it is a road game at Texas A&M, could be tricky. At UMass, why they're playing at UMass is beyond me. I don't know, but it's a game they'll win. Home against Auburn. This is a game Missouri's got to win. Auburn, I think, is going to beat a team or two this year that maybe people don't see coming. Regardless of what you think about Auburn, Hugh Freeze has been in the SEC before, and when he was at Ole Miss, we saw what he did there, and he was able to beat Alabama a time or two. He beat Kirby Smart in Kirby's first year. He's got a way of winning some games. Year 2 there for Hugh Freeze at Auburn. If they can get the quarterback situation figured out, which is a big if, because that's the thing about Hugh Freeze. He has to have his quarterback in order for his offense to work at all. But this is a game that could be tricky for Missouri. Now, it's a home game for Missouri, so that helps. I don't think Missouri has a huge home field advantage, but Auburn does have a huge home field advantage. So Missouri gets an advantage by not having to play at Auburn, even if their own home field advantage isn't great. But then they play on the road at Bama. Again, you have to at least admit that it's a possibility Missouri loses that game. Alabama will probably be the favorite at home there against Mizzou. Then a bye week, and then Oklahoma. Again, another tough game here. Old Big 12 matchup, Oklahoma and Missouri. Home game for Missouri. They're going to really need to win this one. And then they close the season out here on the road at South Carolina, on the road at Mississippi State, and home against Arkansas. They probably have to win all 3 of those games if they want any chance of making the playoffs, because I think they're going to drop a couple of games somewhere along the way. Maybe it's Bama and Oklahoma. Maybe it's Oklahoma and Auburn. Maybe it's Bama and Texas A&M. I think they're losing a couple of those games. If they do, then they've got to run the table here at the end of the season, which includes 2 back-to-back road games at South Carolina, not easy, and at Mississippi State, one they should win, and then home against Arkansas. I would take the under on Ole Miss as well. I think they're a little bit inflated based off of the season they had last year. I do think Missouri's going to be a good team, but they lose that dynamic running back they had last year. They lose some pieces on defense and an important coach on defense. And I just don't know if they can catch lightning in a bottle 2 years in a row there. It's a lot harder for me to trust a team who sort of has one pop year than it is to trust a team who sort of has been good significantly or consistently over the last several years. And that just hasn't been the case for Missouri. Leading up to last year, Missouri had 3 straight 500 seasons under Drinkwitz. So 500, 500, 500. Then last year they go 11-2 with a New Year's 6 win over Ohio State. That doesn't mean they can't repeat that success. I'm a little hesitant to buy in until I see it. And 9.5 is a high number, especially in a new SEC with a couple of new teams and different schedules and things like that. I would take the under on Missouri at 9.5. Ole Miss at 9.5. This is another interesting one. Ole Miss and Missouri, 2 teams that sort of rose to the top or near the top of the SEC last year, seemingly out of the blue. Lane Kiffin been at Ole Miss for a while now. Quarterback is back. He did lose Quinshawn Judkins to the portal, which is a big loss. He is a really, really good running back. Broke some SEC records there in his first couple of years in Oxford. They're going to have to find a way to replace that. Their defense, I think, needs to play a little bit better overall. And they got to find a way to win the big games. It's still with Lane Kiffin. Now, to his credit, he's gotten Ole Miss to the point where, for the most part, they're beating the teams they're supposed to beat. And that hasn't always been the case for a team like Ole Miss. But they still struggle in those big games. You remember the Alabama game from last year? Alabama appeared to be down for the count. They were coming out of that debacle against South Florida where they couldn't even get a first down, never mind score any points. And Ole Miss comes into town, and they just couldn't do anything. Yeah, it was an ugly game. I think it ended up being, 17-10 or 24-14 or something like that. It's an ugly game. Ole Miss offensively couldn't do anything, and they just fumbled the ball and dropped it when it felt like they had a chance to kind of knock Bama out for the season there. Later in the year, they came into Athens to play Georgia and just got absolutely blown out of the building. They lost by 30 points or whatever it was. They've got to play better in the big moments. And if they do that this year, they'll go over this 9.5. How confident are you they'll do that? I don't know. Let's take a look at their schedule. Is Ole Miss on here for me to click on? No. But if we click on Mississippi State, we can get to Ole Miss. There they are. So let's take a look at Ole Miss's schedule. Again, their number is at 9.5. Furman, win. Middle Tennessee, win. At Wake Forest, win. Georgia Southern, win. They're going to start 4-0, right? Then it gets real. Home against Kentucky. I think this will be an interesting game. Brock Vandergrift, Kentucky will have already played Georgia by this point, so we'll know a lot more about Kentucky when this game is played than we do now as far as how Brock Vandergrift is going to fit in there at quarterback. But it's a home game for Ole Miss, which helps. They'll probably be favored, and I would lean Ole Miss right now in that game. On the road at South Carolina, again, they'll be favored. They should win that one, but it can be a tricky place to play. We'll see. And then at LSU, this is the first real game I see where you have to consider a possibility of a loss here. Definitely possible that Ole Miss could go into Baton Rouge, Tiger Stadium, and take an L. Not saying they will, but it's a possibility. Oklahoma, a possible loss. On the road at Arkansas, probably will win that one. Georgia, now they get Georgia at home, which is a huge advantage versus last year when they had to travel to Athens to play. They're going to be an underdog here. They got destroyed. The game was not competitive. Now, will it be closer this year with it being an Ole Miss? Probably. But you definitely have to consider the possibility that Ole Miss could lose that one. So that's 2 or 3 possible losses there. Again, not saying they'll lose all 3, but LSU, Oklahoma, Georgia, potential losses. At Florida, they got to win that one. Florida's down bad. They're horrible. They're just terrible. Billy Napier doesn't know what he's doing. That's breaking news there. And then Mississippi State. So I really only see 3 games that Ole Miss could potentially lose. So I think 9.5 is the right number. If they lose all 3 of those games, they'll be 9-3. If they win one of them, just one of them, they'll be 10-2 and likely headed to the playoffs. This is one of the reasons why Ole Miss is getting so much hype this offseason is because of the way the schedule lays out. LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia. How many of those 3 teams can they beat? If they beat 1 or 2 of them, they're probably winning 10 or 11 games, which is over the number here of 9.5. I would probably lean over on Ole Miss right now. Tennessee, 8.5. Tennessee fans not happy about that. Brand new quarterback, Nico. The question for me with Tennessee is this. Is Nico going to be more like Hendon Hooker from 2 years ago or more like Joe Milton from last year, right? Is Hendon Hooker going to play up here or is he going to play down here? I think the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. I don't think he's going to be as good as Hendon Hooker was 2 years ago. I think he'll be better than what Joe Milton was last year. Can Tennessee continue to run the ball? That obviously will help any quarterback, but particularly a first-year starter like Nico. Defensively, can Tennessee take another step or 2 forward? Tennessee played a little bit better, particularly against a run last year than they did the year before, but they're going to have to continue to improve defensively in order to get where they want to go. But Vegas has their win total set at 8.5, so let's take a look at their schedule and see if there's a way we think Tennessee can go over that number. Here's Tennessee's schedule. Chattanooga, win. Versus NC State. I do not think this is a guaranteed win for Tennessee. I think this is a possible loss. NC State's getting a lot of hype heading into the season. They're getting a lot of hype during the offseason. They return a lot. They've got an experienced coaching staff with Dave Duren at head coach there. They're ranked in the top 25 of every single preseason ranking. A lot of people have them as the 2nd or 3rd best team in the ACC. Now, I've been leading the charge. The ACC is not that good. Believe me, I get it. But look what happened last year in the SEC versus ACC matchups early in the year. The ACC absolutely dominated those matchups. Now, Tennessee beat an ACC team. Was it Virginia or whoever, if I remember right? This is a huge step up from Virginia here when you're talking about playing NC State. It's a neutral site game, but it's a neutral site game in North Carolina at Charlotte, so take that any way you want. This is not a guaranteed win. This is early in the year here. Nico will only have one game, this Chattanooga game, to prepare for this NC State game. I think Tennessee will be favored. I think Tennessee probably wins the game. But I think you have to consider the possibility that Tennessee could lose this one here. Kent State will be a win. On the road at Oklahoma, another game Tennessee could lose. Again, Nico versus Jackson Arnold. These are 2 second-year quarterbacks starting for the first year, right? And each one of these QBs started in the bowl game last year, and neither looked great, in my opinion. Nico played better than Jackson Arnold did, but now both these kids have a full off season to develop as the starter. It's a road game at Oklahoma. This is not a guaranteed win for Tennessee by any means. I think you have to consider the possibility, again, that they could lose that one. At Arkansas, I think Tennessee will handle that. Florida, I don't know what happened last year to Tennessee on the road at Florida. Tennessee was way better than Florida last year, and mentally, Tennessee had lost that game mentally before the game ever kicked off. Now, that game was in Gainesville. This one's in Knoxville. Tennessee will be favored. I think Tennessee will win. But Tennessee's got like one win against Florida in the last 10 years. Is it possible Billy Napier goes up there and pulls off the upset? Yeah, it's possible. Now, it would be an upset. Tennessee is way better. It would be an upset. But because it's Florida and Tennessee, and we've seen the way this game has played out over the last decade, it's possible. It's at least possible Tennessee loses that one. Alabama, possible they lose that one. Now, it's at home. They did beat Alabama the last time it was played in Knoxville 2 seasons ago. One of the best games we've seen in college football regular season in the last couple of years. Just 100 points scored. It's going to be another good one in Knoxville, but it could be a loss. Kentucky, Tennessee has had Kentucky's number. Even in years where Tennessee has been good, even in years when Kentucky has been good and Tennessee has been really bad, Tennessee has found a way to beat Kentucky in most years. I think that continues this year in Knoxville. Mississippi State at home in Knoxville again. I think a fairly easy win for Tennessee there. And then on the road at Georgia, a definite possibility that Tennessee loses this one here. Josh Heupel has struggled mightily against Georgia when it comes not only to scoring points but getting first downs. Nobody has shut down, and that's what it's been. It's been Georgia has shut down Josh Heupel's offense 3 seasons in a row, and it will continue most likely this season in Athens. Tennessee will be a significant underdog here. They could lose that one. UTEP will be a win, and at Vandy will be a win. So when you start looking at potential losses here, Georgia, Bama, that's 2. Florida, 3. Oklahoma, 4. NC State, 5. Are they going to lose all 5 of those? They would have to lose all 5 of those. If they lose all 5, they'd go 7-5. If they lose 4 of those, they'll go 8-4. Both of those would be under the number of 8.5. I think they probably go under. It looks like an 8-4 season for Tennessee to me. Now, if Nico comes out and is a lot better than what he looked in the bowl game and has developed, and they replace the wide receivers they lost, Brew McCoy got hurt last year. He's coming back. They still have Squirrel White. They've got some receivers. If they can run the ball, if the defense improves, I could see them getting to 9-3. I don't see them much higher than 9-3. Now, early in the season, if we go back and look at their schedule, if they win this game, if they beat NC State and then win on the road at Oklahoma, now you might be looking at a 10-2 scenario if that happens. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they're going to win both of those games against NC State and Oklahoma. I think they probably lose at least one of them. But if for some reason they start 4-0 with wins against NC State and Oklahoma, then everybody else should watch out, because then this Florida game becomes a lot more winnable to me. The Alabama game becomes a lot more winnable. Even the Georgia game becomes a lot more winnable. Not that I don't see a 12-0. I'm not predicting any SEC team to go 12-0. I'll just go ahead and let that cat out of the bag now. But if they somehow beat NC State, which they could do, and then win on the road at Oklahoma in game 3 or 4 of Nico's career, I might have to reassess Tennessee. And it could happen. So if they start 4-0, I think Tennessee probably goes 10-2 and makes the playoffs. If they drop a game to NC State or Oklahoma or both, then I think it becomes possible that the under could hit on this 8.5. I'm going to take the under. I think it feels like an 8-4 type of deal to me for Tennessee on that. Texas A&M Aggies 8.5. I'll take the under here. I don't even need to look at the schedule. I will look at the schedule, I guess, but let me find Texas A&M on here. Where are they hiding at? There they are. Let's click Texas A&M. Is that right? 8.5. I don't understand this at all. We've been making fun of Texas A&M for a decade because the best they can do in their good years is 8-4. Does anybody think this is going to be one of Texas A&M's good years? They lost a ton of talent through the portal. That monster recruiting class they signed 2 years ago has basically disintegrated at this point, and they've got a brand new coaching staff. Now, I like Mike Elko, and he's been at Texas A&M before. He's a defensive guy, and I get it, and I think it's a good hire and a good fit there. Not this year, though. It's going to be a rough year, I think, for Texas A&M. But let's take a look at the schedule. Notre Dame, they probably lose at home to Notre Dame. It's definitely at least a losable game. You got to consider the possibility. At Florida, they could lose that one. I'm not high on Florida at all. I think Florida's looking at probably a 4 or 5 win season. But come on, this is Texas A&M here. On the road at Florida in the swamp early in the year, game 3 for Mike Elko. Yes, they could lose that one. I'm not predicting that necessarily, but of course they could possibly lose. They could start 1-2. I mean, that is, of course, that's possible. Bowling Green and McNeese, they'll win. Versus Arkansas, boy, they better win that one. Missouri, I mean, they get them at home, but my God, Missouri is no joke. At Mississippi State, they should win that one. LSU, 50-50 at best. I mean, it's possible they lose. It is a home game for A&M. At South Carolina, boy, you better win that one too. New Mexico State, they will win. At Auburn, I don't think is a guaranteed win for Texas A&M. And then, of course, they play Texas, which is clearly not a guaranteed win. There are 5 or 6 games on here, easy, that you could see Texas A&M losing. They could lose to Texas. They could lose at Auburn. They could lose to LSU. They could lose to Missouri. They could lose at Florida. They could lose to Notre Dame. They're going to lose 4 of those. There is no way they're going over 8.5 wins. This might be the easiest bet on the board. Texas A&M under 8.5. Auburn, 7.5. We're going to have to look at the schedule here because I think this is a good number for Auburn. I do think Auburn's going to be improved, like I mentioned earlier, in year 2 under Hugh Freeze. So you look at their schedule. Alabama, A&M win. Cal should be a win, although it was a struggle fest last year in that game between Auburn and Cal. This year it's a home game for Auburn, which is a big benefit. New Mexico, they should win. Arkansas, this is a must-win game here. If they can't beat Arkansas, they've got a lot of losses coming up later in the year. Oklahoma, they could lose. At Georgia, they could lose. At Missouri, they could lose. At Kentucky, they could lose. And then Texas A&M, they could lose. That's a lot of could lose on here. 8.5, 7.5. I think that's the right number. I don't think there's an obvious way to bet this one. I could see 8-4 if things go well. I could see 7-5 or 6 if they don't. Hard to pick a side on that one. Y'all can let me know down below what you think. Oklahoma at 7.5. This one makes the Oklahoma man mad. Again, I think this is a fair number for Oklahoma. If we click on Oklahoma here, we can pull their schedule up. The over-under again for Oklahoma set at 7.5 games. Temple, win. Houston, win? Maybe? I think they'll beat Houston. Tulane. Let me ask you this. Which is a tougher game, Tulane or Houston? Houston's a Power 5 team. They're in the Big 12. Tulane is not. Which is a tougher game? Might be Tulane. Tennessee, they could lose that one. On the road at Auburn, could lose that one. Texas, definitely could lose that one. South Carolina, got to win that one at home. At Ole Miss, could lose that one. The Maine Black Bears, what the hell is that? I don't know. By the way, I don't have a Maine Black Bears helmet. Someone send me one, please. Mini helmet. Thank you. On the road at Missouri, could lose that one. Alabama could lose. At LSU, could lose. Now you see where the 7-5 comes from. If they lose to LSU, Bama, let's say they even beat Missouri. Let's say they beat Missouri, but lose to LSU and Bama, that's 2 losses. Lose to Ole Miss, that's 3. Let's say you beat Texas, but you lose to Tennessee and one of these 2. Well, there's your 7-5 right there. And that's giving you wins against Texas and Bama. I would take the under 7.5 wins for Oklahoma. I've just not been impressed with what I've seen from Brent Venables. Sorry. You hire a defensive guy. I want to see good defense after 2 years, and I haven't seen it at Oklahoma. I just haven't. You ran Dylan Gabriel off. You ran your offensive coordinator off, too, I think, after you scored 40-something points a game last. I don't know what's going on there. I've got some worries and concerns about Oklahoma. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'll take the under. All right, they've got the rest of them bunched up here. This is the hot doo-doo that remains in the SEC. Kentucky at 6.5, Arkansas at 5.5, Florida at 5.5, South Carolina at 5.5, Mississippi State 4.5, Vandy at 2.5. Let's why did I click on that? I don't know. There's no real reason, I don't think, that I did that. Vandy 2.5. Let's take a look at that one. Where's Vandy? Let me find Vandy on here. Where are you, Vandy? Where are you, Vandy? Vandy. Did Missouri play Vandy? Trying to find. There's Vandy. Again, I promise I know what I'm doing. All right, here's Vandy. Let's take a look at their schedule. The over-under for Vandy is 2.5. Can Vanderbilt win 3 games or more? Instead of trying to find the losses here, we're going to try to find the wins. Virginia Tech? No, I'm high on Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's going to spank their little bottom blue. Alcorn State? Come on, that's 1 win. At Georgia State? 50-50. 50-50. At Missouri, loss. Alabama, loss. At Kentucky, loss. Ball State, 50-50. Let's say they win 1 game between Georgia State and Ball State. Let's say they split that. Okay, so they beat Alcorn, and then they split with Georgia State and Ball State. That puts them at 2 wins. They now need one more win from here on to get to 3 and go over the number of 2.5. Can they beat Texas? No. Can they win on the road at Auburn? Maybe. Maybe. Vandy and Auburn are 50-50 all time. They've played 30, 40 times, whatever it is. The series is evenly split, which is weird, but it is. But no, I think Auburn beats them. South Carolina. That might be the game they need to win to go over the 2.5 mark. Then they get a bye week and they play at LSU, loss. Tennessee, loss. I think 2.5's the right number for Vandy. I really do. I think if they win one SEC game, they probably go over. If they don't win an SEC game, they're going to be stuck at 2-10, and the under will hit. Let's take a look at Florida. It's fun to laugh at Florida. They're absolutely terrible. Where's Florida on here? There they are. Here's the Florida schedule. Florida's win total is set at 5.5, and I think that's the right number. I think I said earlier, I think they're going to win 4 or 5 games. So I guess I would take the under at 5.5. Let's find wins. Miami, I think they lose that game. I think Miami beats them. Samford, there's a win. Texas A&M, it's a home game, 50-50. At Mississippi State, they got to win that one. They've got to win. Let's give them a win there. That would be 2 wins, Samford and Mississippi State, and 50-50 at home against Texas A&M. Central Florida, 50-50. 50-50. So if we count Texas A&M and Central Florida as 50-50, let's give them 1 win against one of those 2 teams. Let's say they win 1, lose 1. Okay, so Samford win, that's 1 win. Mississippi State win, that's 2. And then they split Samford and UCF, so they're at 3 wins. That puts them at 3 wins after the UCF game. At Tennessee, probably a loss. Kentucky has won like 2 out of 3 and 3 out of 5 against Florida. It's a home game, though. Let's give Florida the benefit of the doubt. That puts them at, 4 wins? All right, that gives them 4 wins. Again, I'm giving Florida benefit of the doubt here. That gives them 4 wins. Georgia, loss. At Texas, loss. Home against LSU, loss. Ole Miss, loss. At Florida State, loss. 4-8. 4-8, and that's giving you wins against Kentucky and either Central Florida or Texas A&M. So I would take the under on Florida at 5.5 at 5.5 wins. South Carolina Gamecocks, the over/under for them also at 5.5. Let's see, who does South Carolina play? They play LSU, don't they? So let's find South Carolina that way. Here's South Carolina's schedule right here. Old Dominion, let's give them a win. At Kentucky, 50-50. Could win it, could lose it. LSU at home, probably a loss. Akron, win. So you're sitting at 2 wins and 1 50-50 game. Ole Miss, loss. At Bama, loss. At Oklahoma, loss. You're still sitting at 2 wins with 1 50-50 game. Texas A&M, 50-50. We'll give them 1 more win, benefit of the doubt. Not necessarily Texas A&M, but either them or LSU, or either them or Kentucky. So you're sitting at 3 wins now after Texas A&M. At Vandy, 4 wins. Missouri, you get them at home. Can you pull off an upset? If you do, that would put you at 5 wins, in which case you could hit your 6th win against Wofford, which would put you over your number of 5.5. You're going to have to pull off a massive upset here to go over the 5.5 because I don't think you're winning on the road at Clemson. I think this is the right number for South Carolina, so I probably wouldn't bet this either way. I think if they win the games they're supposed to win and maybe pull one out against a Kentucky or Texas A&M, they get to 5 wins. If they pull out a huge upset against somebody, they probably get to 6 wins. We see a lot of upsets, so I think this is the right number at 5.5. What else is interesting to look at? Arkansas, lots of changes going on there. Let's see, where's Arkansas? Does Oklahoma play Arkansas? I don't think so. Does Texas play Arkansas? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. So let's find Arkansas that way. There's Arkansas. Win total for Arkansas is also at 5.5. Can they make a bowl game and go over to 5.5 wins? UAPB Golden Lions. Okay, we'll give you a win there. At Oklahoma State, an interesting non-con game here. I actually like what Oklahoma State has coming back. I think they have a coaching advantage here over Arkansas. I'm going to lean Oklahoma State in that one. UAB, let's give them a win there, but be careful. UAB, they love fighting up in a weight class. At Auburn, I'm leaning Auburn there. Texas A&M, 50-50 at best. Tennessee, a likely loss. LSU loss at Mississippi State. Got to find a way to win there. In fact, I'll give you a win there. Ole Miss loss, Texas loss, Louisiana Tech, you got to win. Then at Missouri. I would go over to 5.5 here for Arkansas, right? They can beat Louisiana Tech. Let's say they beat Mississippi State. That would be 2 wins. Can they beat UAB? 3. UAPB 4. God, I don't know. I wouldn't bet that one either. I don't know. I guess you got to leave that one alone too. Kentucky 6.5. New starter Brock Vandagriff. What are they going to do? I don't know. Let's see. Can we find Kentucky here? Here's Kentucky. Kentucky's schedule. Their win total is at 6.5. 6.5. That seems low for Kentucky based on how they've played over the last 3, 4, 5 years. Southern Miss win. South Carolina home game for Kentucky. Got to find a way to win that one. Georgia loss. Ohio win. Ole Miss loss. Vandy win. So you probably looking at 3-3 maybe through your first 6 games. I don't see you beating Georgia or Ole Miss for sure. That's 2 losses. You'd have to beat South Carolina, Southern Miss, Ohio, and Vandy to get to 4-2. That's possible. 4-2 is possible. Your first 6 games. 3-3, I think, more likely. At Florida, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt there. At Auburn, it's a home game. This is probably the make or break game here. If you beat Auburn, you're probably going over 6.5 wins. Lose to Auburn, you're probably going under 6.5. That's probably the key game because you're not winning at Tennessee. You're definitely beating Murray State. I don't see you winning at Texas. It could come down to the Louisville game. You could be sitting at 6 wins when you play Louisville. Win, that puts you at 7, and you go over to 6.5. Louisville win, Murray State win. Let's say you beat Auburn. That would be 3 wins. Let's say you beat Louisville and Auburn. That would be 3 wins. At Florida, Vandy's a win. That would be 4, 5, 6. I would probably go over 6.5 wins for Kentucky. I think I would take over 6. I could see 7. I could see 7-5 here for Kentucky. I could see 7-5. South Carolina, we did them. Mississippi State, Vandy. There you go. That's the win totals. Which ones do you like? Which ones would you go over? Which ones would you go under? Let me know down below which conference you want to see, or maybe you don't care. If you want to see me do another conference, let me know. Anyway, have a good morning if you can.